Hi everyone, welcome to the recording. We've got Briana back again today, which is wonderful. So we're going to be talking about ticks, tick-borne infections in Australia and what Briana sort of sees in her practice. So I'll pass it over to you, Briana.
Hello, thank you for having me back again, Peter. I know that it's not easy to fit in these Q&As. You're a busy man as well. So thank you very much for having me back. So I thought today we'd have a little bit of a chat about the different tick-borne diseases that I'm seeing in Australian patients and what the symptoms are, so that if you are feeling those things in your life where you've got a bit of a mystery illness and you don't feel like you're getting to a root cause place with it, you can start to think, what are the key words that you might be hearing or feeling that might make you think, let's look deeper and see if this is a vector-borne disease.
Okay, so yes, you come across a lot of people that come to you with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia and all the symptoms of those. And of course, those type of symptoms can replicate, somebody who's got a tick-borne infection. Mm-hmm. And I know that the biggest ones in Australia that are recognised are Rickettsias. Mm-hmm. And you're in Western Australia, and there's a lot of Rickettsias over in Western Australia, and it's usually mm-hmm. around the coastal regions. And mm-hmm. probably the reason they say it's around the coastal regions is because that's where people are, yes. and that's where they record them. But, ticks are all around Australia except in our deserts. And we've also got... of course, this is where people get bitten, usually on holidays as well. Mm-hmm. So how do you go about sort of determining people have got tick infections, especially when testing is quite poor for a lot of them, and a lot of people don't know about our infections, which, as I said before, the Rickettsias are the main ones that are recognised. Mm-hmm. And in the past, they used to be, what's the word I'm looking for? You have to let the government know about them. I think Western Australia...
notifiable.
Notifiable, that's the word. Mm-hmm. I think in Western Australia you still do, but I don't think many people do that. I think Tasmania is another place they do. But it used to be Australia-wide that they were notifiable sort of illnesses. Mm-hmm. And the other one is Q Fever, which mm-hmm. is in ticks mostly in northern Queensland.
That's where I've seen patients have it from. It's that camping trip up to Cape York or something, and that's when they come back with Q Fever results.
That's right. And there was a vet a few years ago who did end up getting that, but it took her ages to determine that she had Q Fever from that. Mm-hmm. So talk about the infections, because you sort of come across and you sort of think that there might be other infections as well. So do you want to talk about that and how you go about determining it?
Yeah, so I guess I see a pretty educated patient population. They're coming to me because they've already worked out they've got a tick disease. When you know you've got a problem, you find the expert in the problem, especially something as poorly understood as tick-borne diseases in Australia. And I want to zoom it out before we dive in. And it's tick-borne diseases is one of the great misnomers. It's not just ticks that transmit tick-borne diseases. So it's any insect vector who has multiple blood meals in a lifetime. So if you're a one and done, one meal, reproduce, dead, you're probably not going to transmit. But if you are a mosquito or a bed bug, someone who likes to bite lots of critters, like lots of things, whether that's kangaroos or wild deer populations or humans, then you've got the opportunity to collect tick-borne diseases and pass them on to a mammal. Or to your offspring. So tick mamas pass their tick diseases to their tick babies, and mosquitoes as well. So it's not just ticks. Queensland Ag Department had a position statement saying that farmers in mice plagues need to wear thick leather gloves when they're handling and cleaning out grain silos, because mice bites can transmit borrelia species. I had a patient last week, it was a fox bite. So it's any infected thing can transmit it through blood as well, which it means that we can put it on the table to consider for a greater proportion of our population of mystery symptoms. It's not just tick bite, bullseye, borrelia.
Yeah.
Or if you're over in the States, tick bite, bullseye, Lyme disease. It's something weird is really what I want you all to start thinking about. Do you have weird symptoms affecting multiple body systems. And so when I say systems, I mean the neurological system, the digestive system, the circulatory system, the musculoskeletal systems. If we've got 2 or 3 systems involved or more and multiple different symptoms, so headaches, fatigue, joint pains, dizziness, numbness, digestive stuff, cognitive decline, mood changes, if we've got lots of different symptoms popping up, often suddenly, that's when I want you to start thinking, let's dig deeper here.
Yeah. So really we should be talking about some kind of a vector. Now, some of the things that you've mentioned officially, again, from all my sort of reading, they don't officially recognise some of these other vectors, especially with borrelia, for a start. I mean, they have in Germany looked at certain species of mosquitoes and they can carry it, but they've come to the conclusion that it cannot transfer it. And that's the official sort of response. And I do see a lot of things on social media. Yeah, you can get borrelia from just about anything. And I'm kind of going, maybe you could. I mean, there's certainly questionable things there, but they haven't done the research in it. And, of course, they haven't done the research in it and got verified proof. They kind of go, well, no, you can't. And that's where the doctors are going to come in saying, well, you can't do that. They can't get it because they're only fed that information. So it makes it really tricky in regards to doing that. But you are right. I mean, fleas are the biggest carriers of rickettsias. I mean, we had an outbreak in Melbourne a number of years ago amongst the homeless, and they had all rickettsia. But they found it, they treated it, and I guess there was no follow-up reports of how they suffered or not long-term. And that's the other thing too, is a lot of people do research in regards to especially borrelia and long-term consequences of that, and they don't like the term chronic Lyme. They use post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, but it is a chronicity that patients are suffering. But they haven't done much in regard to any of these other infections and the chronicity of those. But look, there's been a lot of infections found in our ticks: Bartonella, Babesia, Anaplasma, number of rickettsias, of course. There's a lot of research in Australia on the rickettsias. And they've found a number of borrelias as well. But at this point, officially, there isn't anything that says that they have human harm. And that's what a patient community is really waiting for, proof that there's harm. But you're picking it up clinically, and within the patient groups, they're all saying that, they've got that and they're testing for it both here and overseas. But especially here, they just say, no, that's a false positive. Do you want to talk to this and about these false positives in testing and so forth? And I guess we've got unanswered questions in regards to all of that as well.
I see false negatives far more in testing. I see patients who very clearly have a tick bite, very clearly have sudden onset of symptoms, often flu-like, and pain to start with. And then we'll do a provocation, I think. So if we're doing a test very quickly after a tick bite, we might not be getting enough seroconversion to then get an accurate result. So you're always wanting to wait 6 to 12 weeks after a tick bite to check to see what tick bite infections it could be.
And that's because they're looking at antibodies, aren't they?
We're looking at antibody formation.
So your body doesn't produce an antibody within, they say, usually the first 3 to 4 weeks. That's usually spikes around about that 4 weeks or part time. So if you get somebody comes in and they've got, say, a rash and ricketsias give you often, well, not often, probably 50% of the time.
Flaky kind of rashes. They're not that traditional bullseye. They're giving you a different type of...
a spotty kind of rash, which is often seen by doctors as being something else.
Just a post-viral rash.
But that could be a rickettsia rash. And if you do pick it up as being a rickettsia and you do the testing straight away, it might come back negative.
Yes.
And then people discount it completely there. So people need to know, practitioners especially, and not yourself, because you're very, over all of this, whereas many others don't know this. They say, we'll send off for a test. It's in the first week or two and it comes back negative, and the doctor will say, well, it's negative. We can rule it out. Well, we really can't rule it out.
No. But I think that's one of the key things with chronic illnesses is double back to always keep that never well since idea. So when did your symptoms start? You've never been well since you went camping. You've never been well since you had that partner. You've never been well since you lived in that mouldy house. Take it always back and think, okay, well, we had some testing, we had some investigations. Has there been improvements in testing and investigations? Can we double back to that now? Do we completely take that off the table? Do we believe that? Or should we look at it again from a different lens? So if you get a no from your doctor, that's not necessarily a no. It just means, did we get to the edge of that person's knowledge and experience? And do we need somebody else to ask more intelligent questions, perhaps? So you've asked a couple of questions around testing. So testing for Rickettsias in Australia, I think, is reasonably accurate through the Australian Rickettsial Reference Laboratory in Geelong.
Yep.
It's a Medicare rebatable test. Any GP can order it. Most GPs wouldn't be experienced or knowledgeable enough to think to order it, because GPs are still fed that line that says there's no Lyme in Australia.
Yeah.
And they take all the tick-borne diseases off the table because there's no borrelia burgdorferi. There's conjecture on how many borrelias we have. I think it's close to a dozen. Peter and I were talking before, and he's a research man. That's his mind. He thinks it's sort of 5 or 6, maybe. What we have in Australia will cross-react and test as borrelia burgdorferi. That's a definite. So we can get a Lyme positive test here for borrelia burgdorferi with an Australian bite. So I would use as a first port of call after a camping trip, after a walk in the bush, after some weird stuff's happening, whether it's a known tick bite or a lot of mosquitoes. So that mosquito question's interesting. When I've had patients who've presented to me with a tick-borne disease after mosquito bites or bed bug bites, I personally haven't seen lice, but it's possible definitely. It's not one bite. It's usually when you go out and you're mobbed and you're itchy everywhere and you've got 50 to 100 bites. That's the person that'll come and then get a tick-borne disease, even though it was a mosquito vector. So I would start in Australia with just pushing your doctor for a full test through ARRL. So when they write that, there is a path report on the ARRL website. They can download that path form now, and you just write on it all tests, no culture. So that way they're going to run all their PCR, all their antibody tests for all the species of organisms that they're testing for, which is all the Rickettsias. They're doing what they now call the Lyme profile version 4, I think it is, and it's got some antibodies, some Western blot, some PCR. They would do Babesia, Bartonella, scrub typhus. They're casting a pretty broad net. Now, before I do any tick testing, we need to do a provocation. A couple of ways you can do it. The Americans will do it with an antibiotic provocation because they've got a lot more Lyme literate doctors, Lyme literate chiropractors, osteopaths, people who can prescribe antibiotics, whereas in Australia I would do it with a herbal provocation, and that's 3 different herbs. Take 1 week 1, both week 2, and 3 on week 3. And then on the Monday always, so that you can assign for shipping wherever you are to get it to Geelong, have an infrared sauna, hot and long, which is not what I would normally recommend initially, but I really want to drive stuff out of hiding and into the bloodstream. So you do your provocation and then your sauna, get the blood drawn, ship that off to Geelong as your first point of call. The reason I don't do culture is because they're only culturing Borrelia. Borrelia is too intelligent to grow in a petri dish. So if you're paying for that test, you're going to get a negative. It's not going to really work. There's no point paying for that. But your GP can write that up, make it Medicare rebatable. You'll get 50% back. And it's a bit of a throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks test. So if you've done your provocation and then you've done that 6 weeks post bites, you might get some good information, and you might not get a Borrelia, you might not get a Babesia, but you probably get some Rickettsias. I pretty consistently see that they are accurate through that lab. So it's a first start. And if it's a no, don't take it off the table. False negatives are really, really high in tick-borne diseases because we're asking for antibodies, particularly your intelligent organisms like a Borrelia or a Bartonella. Those guys are changing your immune system on purpose so that you host them. So they're turning down the parts of your immune system that might make an antibody to them. When you're making an antibody to them, then they're going into their biofilm colonies and they're secreting chemical signals that tell each other, hey, we've been flagged. Change your outer surface protein so that you look different when you venture out again and find a new place to burrow into, find some new delicious joints to live in, and cause pain for that person. The immune system's not going to flag you because you're looking different. You've got an outer surface protein change. So those intelligent organisms, it's very difficult to make an antibody response that's accurate to them because they're constantly changing and disguising themselves to evade you.
Yeah. With what you've just been saying, you understand all of this, but somebody who's not living in this world would not understand this. And this information is not passed on to both doctors, and certainly information is not passed on to the general public, because you would probably see people who've been quite unwell for a while, not somebody who's just been bitten and suddenly finds you and then comes to you and you get testing. I just want to, again, I don't know the answer to this, but the question would be with Rickettsias, would you need to do a provocation early with that? Would Rickettsias spike much sooner as an antibody response than, say, the borrelias? Would that take a lot longer? That's another thing, depends on the immune response. And it's going to be different for different people. Some people might have a very reactive immune system, and they're probably the people who might get the rushes, whereas others would have a very slow response to it. Might be the immune system might be sort of suppressing that quite well initially. I mean, in my case, theoretically, I was bitten overseas, but I was not sick for years and years. And I have heard many times that borrelia, you can be infected, but asymptomatic. And that raises another issue as well, because years later, you could come sick and you would never even consider a tick bite, because less than 50% of people actually, recognise the fact that they had a tick bite. You also talked about heaps of tick bites, as in mostly those are the nymphs. And people think, how could something so tiny? I mean, these are, you could hardly see them.
Oh, they're microscopic. You can't feel them. Like, they're so tiny on your skin that it's...
And they can still bite.
And see them.
Yeah, and they can still pass on infections.
Absolutely.
And depending on the tick, some ticks can pass it from the mother to the egg and then through it, and others don't do that. They have to get it from hosts. So it's very tick dependent as well. I mean, there's so much science involved in all of this as well.
Yeah.
And then there's the other area which, we can talk about forever, is there's no social media letting people know about how to prevent being bitten in the first place as well. There's a little bit about mosquitoes for sure, fight the bite campaigns, but there's nothing in regards to ticks. It's something that we've got to advocate for. I mean, it's so easy to do. I mean, you would be less busy if more people knew that they had to, just like slip, slop, slap, they would just put on their repellents and less likely to be getting bitten as well. I mean, that would be the first step. But let's keep going with these infections and so forth. So when would you normally see people? I think from memory, I got some information from a person who said they were bitten. They work out in the bush in New South Wales, and they started to become sick. They went to see some doctors. The doctors had no clue. They contacted Ticna themselves, and I sort of responded back to them, and I suggested certain things to look up. We've got information on the government website, and it's called DISCAT. We won't go into that, but that's all about tick-borne diseases, what the government officially recognises. And I think I suggested to contact you as well. But she'd been bitten quite some time, and she knew she was bitten, but didn't know what to do. So again, it's a person that's been sick for quite some time. I think she also had testing, and the testing came back negative, which is quite common as well.
It is. And again, just don't take negative testing as a definitive answer. Tick-borne diseases, particularly borreliosis, is still a clinical diagnosis made by an experienced practitioner. It's made by a Lyme literate doctor. It's a clinical diagnosis. It's based on your symptoms. So most of my patients are coming having been sick for a period of time. When I first moved into Lyme 8 years ago, it was sort of an average of 13 years that people had been sick before they were finding me. or finding answers and knowing what it was. Whereas now I will more often see patients who've been sick less than 5 years now. So I think we are getting a better range of understanding about tick-borne diseases in Australia, that they are a possibility, that we need to keep them on the radar. I do have people who are very quickly finding care after a tick bite too. Within 6 months, they've really managed to nail it down to, one of 12 doctors in Australia maybe that are good enough, intelligent enough, brave enough to treat tick-borne diseases, to listen to their patients, and have got the knowledge that might be helpful to you. So it's not an easy thing to find a Lyme literate doctor here. It's not an easy thing to find a Lyme literate doctor that's taking on patients,
Yeah.
that's actually got prescribing rights, and they're not being regulated heavily by the government for trying to help people.
Yeah. I think one of the issues, though, you've just said Lyme literate doctor. It's not a term that is recognised in Australia.
No, it's the American term. It comes out of the ILACS training. Yeah.
You know, and I think that's one of the problems. We need to. Australia is quite a unique place. We are girt by sea. We do have different infections. We do have different ticks. There are cousins to the overseas ones. But so I think if we change our vocabulary and utilise the term, look, tick-borne infections, generic term, or going much higher is vector-borne infections, because they can be fleas, they can be other things as well. I think
I think that would take some of the stigma out of it if we zoomed that out and said, what are the possible infections that people could have in Australia, and could that be driving your chronic illness? Or could that be driving your sudden flu-like symptoms after you've been camping? Or walking in the bush or playing football or whatever it might be? I think we would catch so many more people, but because we're not training our doctors that these diseases even exist, and as you know, with Rickettsias, it's a big disease here, we're allowed to diagnose it, we're allowed to treat it. Any doctor should know about it. Have it on their filter list of what the possible differential diagnosis is when they're seeing a person. They should be making that mud map in their minds of what could be possibly causing this, and let's test for it. Let's find it out. You're allowed to treat rickettsia here. We're allowed to do doxycycline. It's a tiny course. It's about a month or less, but doctors can find that and refer to an infectious disease specialist at a local hospital. It's a known and recognised disease. If we just started there, we'd save people suffering. The difficulty with tick bites is that the average tick, and I haven't seen the Australian data on this, the average tick in America has 3 different tick infection species within it. So you're not just getting a borrelia, you're getting a side dose of a rickettsia, 1 or 2 maybe. You're possibly getting Bartonella or Babesia or something else as well. It's a smorgasbord they give you.
They do. I mean, it's nature's dirty needle. Overseas, it's the 3 Bs, and they're becoming more aware of that as well. I think, Lyme has been the most researched overseas for sure, but they are now finding a lot more. And with climate change, it's changing dramatically, and they're starting to have to become aware of the Babesia. And the term co-infection, I find a difficult term. It's
limiting as well. It's just an infection.
It's an infection, and it
you can get them on their own, not with a borrelia.
Exactly. There's people that get straight Bartonella. They don't get anything else, or straight Babesia. So the co-infection thing is a bit like saying cancer in a paper cut. It really, puts down the fact that the Babesias and Bartonella can be just as serious, if not more serious.
They're horrible infections. You don't want them.
Exactly. And Rocky Mountain spotted fever, I mean, there's people recently in Mexico have died from that. It's quite a serious infection. So I think, changing the language that we're using in Australia would help dramatically, changing it away from this Lyme literate doctor, because it doesn't exist. What we have is infectious disease doctors, and they need to be trained.
They don't know.
They don't know.
They don't know. I think
there
is one at a private hospital here in Perth that does, but European by trade. Like, he's a European, so he has that background that Lyme is real, because Lyme is real in other parts of the world. So he's just got a bit more of an open-minded lens. But I think there's some. What's your major hospital there? Is it the Alfred in Victoria?
It's the Alfred, and the infectious disease.
One doctor there as well that I'm like, so there's 2 IDs in Australia that are possibly open-minded enough to consider vector-borne diseases.
That's right. Because that's because they've been fed this thing about the dogma of there's no Lyme disease. When you read a lot of the research documents in Australia as well, they actually state we did not find Lyme borrelia, which is Borrelia burgdorferi, sensu stricto or sensu lato. And that could be very true. But they did find other borrelia. Those are the questions that we should be asking. Well,
Yes,
if it's
definitely.
not that, if it's not a Lyme borrelia, and they've classified similar relapsing fever borrelias,
Mhm, mhm,
which can give you a bullseye rash,
mhm,
and we have seen plenty of patients in Australia with a bullseye rash. You cannot
mhm,
deny that anecdotal evidence. I mean, it's
mhm,
huge in Australia.
mhm, mhm. The
What's
bullseyes
that?
are only coming, but the borrelias are existing in multiple body forms. And so my understanding with a bullseye is that it only comes if the borrelia was in its spirochete form.
Yeah, interesting.
And so if it's in its cell wall deficient form, it's not gonna give
Yeah,
you the bullseye. So that's why it's very inaccurate. It's somewhere between, I think you said 50, but I've read studies that say even 32%. It's
it-
very, very low.
yeah.
And you have
CDC
to be
rates.
healthy enough to mount a response. You have to be not too stressed. You have to be not fighting with your partner. You have to have the right amount of nutrients to make an immune response. You need to not live in a moldy building because your moldy building exposure is already dampened the immune response. So nobody's making a response anymore when they find a new infection. There are so many factors for why some person gets sick and others don't. And then that's discounting the genetic components of what goes into the chronic or debilitating or long term
Yeah,
tick-borne diseases when it becomes a chronicity.
yeah.
There can be genetic factors there as well.
There is, and there's also the other thing that there are other infections, viral and bacterial, that
Mm-hmm.
can give you a bullseye-looking rash as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not fully defined in Australia exactly what it is, but it
Yep.
leaves something questionable.
Yep.
So you can't sort of say it's definitive.
Yep.
Like in America, there's the Southern Starry, which is a relapsing
Mm-hmm.
fever. It also does give you a
Mm-hmm.
bullseye rash and gives you the
It does.
same kinds of symptoms. The same one in South America, which is the Badger Yoshinari
Mm-hmm.
syndrome, which is a very close cousin to it, but again, they don't classify it in the Lyme borrelia. So it gets
Mm-hmm.
really technical, and they need to be pedantic in science and research.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the patient's concerned, is we're kind of saying, well, we don't care what it is, we
No.
just want to be treated. But
Yes.
I understand that. I'm a patient myself. I've been bitten and have remained sick from it. But the science part of me sort of says, well, you can't treat what you do not know, and that's where they come into the fact. But so we should be saying, look, could these borrelia in Australia be making us sick? And that's a high probability, but we need, they need the research to define that and say, yes, it does cause human harm, and we're still waiting for that research.
Mm-hmm.
I think from Murdoch University should be out end of the year, early next year, where they've finally got all the data analysed. So they've completed it, but they're
Mm-hmm.
looking at the data to be analysed soon, so we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of patient communities holding on to that hope. We're sort of hoping that, yes, they finally found it. Yes, we're right, but it's a different
Mm-hmm.
form of borrelia. Or it could be plenty of other infections,
Mm-hmm.
which we're not even investigated,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or they're discounted totally
Mm-hmm.
so far. And the other infections too, what's interesting about them is you do need different treatment protocols, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You do. And so I think one of the thoughts you just had was that we need to fully understand what it is so we understand how to treat it. And as a naturopath, that's not true for me. So
Yep.
if I was a medical physician and all I had was an antibiotic and I needed an antibiotic that has a certain action that's going to target that part of the outer cell of the bacteria so that the antibody can go in and kill it, I would need that highly specific knowledge and research. As a naturopath, I do not, because I'm treating you as a person.
Yep.
So I'm optimizing your immune system to do its job better. I'm giving you a herb that has multiple actions. A herb is going to have some antibacterial action, some anti-inflammatory, some antioxidant, some liver regenerative, whatever it might be. Herbs have more than one function. So when we're using them, I don't need to be highly specific about, is this Rickettsias, is this a borrelia, is this an Ehrlichia? I don't need it. I need to know how it's affecting you based on your symptoms and your presentation and how you're responding to the last herb I gave you. And then I will make clinical decisions to A, get your body detoxing better so that toxins and corpses can come out when we kill them. But B, repair and support the organs from the damage those infections are doing. And I can make pretty accurate clinical guesses based on how you're presenting to me. But when I give you a herb that I know has a highly specific anti-Bartonella action, for example, and you feel better, that's a clinical clue. I can build off that. When you're getting worse at a full moon, when you're having debilitating night sweats, and I give you some antiparasitics that are targeted to babesia, and your symptoms go down by 20 or 30% that month, that's a clinical clue. I don't need the specificity. I don't even need to know that it's babesia, really. I could give you antiparasitics in general, and you would have an improvement. So I think it's one of the ways that naturopathy is so advantageous, because we're treating each person.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know that naturopaths that are graduating now are the same. I think they're trained a little bit more that run the test, treat for the test, run the gut profile, do what it says. I've been a naturopath 15 years next month. I was trained to treat the person, and to put that puzzle of who you are and what you're presenting to me together, rather than running a ton of tests that are expensive and unnecessary and are just going to tell me prescribe a supplement. How about we just skip to the chase and prescribe the supplement and you tell me how you feel? Save yourself $560. I think there's lots of different ways that we can approach this, but really when we're looking at complex system-wide infections, we have to treat the system. You can't just take someone who's got a 20-year bacterial infection and just give them antibacterial agents and pretend that that's going to be okay, because it's not. Those organisms have been damaging you for 20 years. We need to stop that, fix that, change that.
Yeah. I mean, that's an approach that's rarely done in the medical world. It's with doctors. It really is the test, the drug. And you're right, they don't look at the health of the person, because how bad you are could be based on how unwell in general the person really is as well. So building up the person's overall health, their metabolic health, et cetera, to be able to even handle some diet of herbs, because herbs can be quite powerful as well.
Absolutely. And that's where you need... So there's two things there. A lot of pharmaceuticals just they're doing what they've been made to do, and they've probably got a couple of off-label actions as well. But they don't really have a class of pharmaceuticals that is tone, support, repair, improve. They don't really have actions that will help your body to recover. So herbs do, naturopaths do. I can get your liver to work better. So I can protect you from the damage that an antibiotic is doing to your liver, something like azithromycin, say, is causing liver and kidney and heart harm. I can protect those organs with herbs and nutrients so that you don't get the side effects. I can get those organs working better, and that's measurable on liver function tests. I can get the enzymes back into range so that your body is doing what it should be doing. And when your body works, you'd be very, very surprised how many people get better just by making their bodies work again. Your body is an innately intelligent and adaptable organism. It wants to function perfectly. It doesn't need a single class of a pharmaceutical. Your pain condition isn't because you've got an anti-inflammatory deficiency. It's because you've got a whole inflammatory process that your immune system is going under, and a nutritional deficiencies perhaps. We can target that. And I think one of the things that I've learned this is 8 years now that I've been just exclusively in tick-borne diseases and toxic mold disease as well. The more intensely I work with patients in that first 12 months, the better the results they get. So that standard model that you have with doctors and therapists, where it's, I pay you an appointment, I see you again in a month. That doctor then, they've got, I don't know, how many people are they seeing a week? 80, 100? They've got 100 more case files in their mind, 100 more people's pictures. They're not forming a thorough picture of you, because you're just a number. They're seeing you so infrequently for 7 minutes or 15 minutes or maybe half an hour for a great doctor. They don't have time to truly know and understand you. Whereas when I take on patients, I take them on very intensely for that first 12 months so that I do know you. I do really understand what's happening in your body and your life and your diet and your stress and your sleep and your symptoms and your history and what you've tried. And that is what is getting the complex patients I see much, much better results than when I was having less connection points with them and knowing them less well. That fine-tuning every week or every couple of weeks for the first 6 months, 12 months, whatever it might be, really seems to be getting far better results at the moment than I was seeing even 3 or 4 years ago when I was seeing people more on a see in a month kind of basis.
And plus, you've now sort of fine-tuned and specialised in this particular area of the two. I guess you've mentioned two things, and they seem to go hand in hand a lot of the times as well, and that is the infections, and we've got vector kind of infections. Could be anything. I mean, mycoplasmas as well could come from anywhere.
Absolutely.
And then the mould as well. And you don't have to have both, but it's something that needs to be investigated every time as well.
Okay.
But we'll stick to the infection side of things too. And you're right in pointing out that huge difference. And the other thing you sort of mentioned, which gives people a little bit of hope, you sound like there's this at least a 12-month plan, and some people who might be a lot sicker, there's still an ongoing even beyond that.
Oh, absolutely. And so that 12 months is when I teach you how to heal yourself. I teach you how to think like me, and I get to know you. And we really fine-tune stuff, just baby steps. And those are the baby steps that compound. After that, I'll probably see someone every 6 weeks or every 3 months or twice a year for a long time. For a long time. And then you get well and you just want to fine-tune. You just want to bounce it back over me and say, oh, I haven't seen you in 6 months. I've got these new symptoms. And I'm like, it's just menopause, babe. You know, and we look at that together. I am a naturopath. I am a
holistic person.
Yes.
Look at the whole body.
Yes. So you can come back in 5 years' time because you've got gut stuff. You can come back in 5 years' time because you want to have a baby. You can. And it's not just, oh, you're done now. Thanks. Bye.
Yeah. And you've talked about the damage that these things can do to you. I mean, in a lot of respects, it's, I guess, with what recently, you know, the world being inundated with COVID and now being inundated with long COVID, I mean, they're picking out over 200 symptoms with that. And you kind of go, that one virus could not have caused those 200 symptoms. But within it, it's triggered within individual people a whole variety of things that probably were there or underlying, but not known because your immune system or your health at the time was good enough to keep them at bay. But you got some kind of trauma, and the trauma being this virus, that's now triggered all of this stuff. And the same thing applies when you've cruising through life, went out in the bush, got bitten by a tick, didn't really realise that, started to get sick, flu-like symptoms. This first lot of symptoms are this aches and pains. Especially, you know, if it's borrelia, it's more like the shoulder and the neck stiffness and so forth, headaches and so forth. But rickettsias...
Depends on where the bite is. If you've got a neck bite, you'll get that stuff. If you've got an ankle bite, you're stuck with ankle pain.
Yeah, that's where I guess the arthritis-like things in knees, etc., comes out as well. Very interesting as where the infection goes to first time and the most. But you start also, after a period of time, getting a lot more kind of symptoms as well. The gut can be infected, and let's say affected, but let's say that you do get some antibiotics originally. Well, that's going to affect your gut as well. And most times with doctors, they never consider, well, let's put some probiotics with those antibiotics as well. So you're sort of indicating that you might not do some testing. I suppose it's based on the person because that person's probably lost their job, you know, short on funds as well. And I guess that would be a consideration for you too, in saying, look, I can really work with you and get you much better without doing all of these expensive tests. But sometimes you may need to verify things. And I guess we've talked about the ARL testing. That's relatively cheap in Australia, about $200, I think, in the end, if you do the whole gamut of things.
But yeah, it's for a price point. I think it's a reasonable first place to start. Absolutely. And I think it's got some challenges. In that the borrelia they're checking is only Borrelia burgdorferi. We may or may not have that here. We haven't found it to date. We've got Borrelia's cousins, but we haven't PCR sequenced them, or if we have, we haven't given it to ARL for them to check it. There's
or a test specific for it.
Yeah, there's that stuff. Were you about to ask which other labs I do send off for there, or what kind of tests I would consider?
Yeah, because I guess it depends on the person and what you're sort of finding. And I guess if you start treating somebody and they're starting to improve, as you said before, do you really need to definitely know? For me as a scientist, I kind of like to know and like my stats and data, but others kind of go, no, I don't care, just make me better and get me back into life again. And that's probably the most important thing to do that a practitioner needs to do is to get a person well again,
Yeah.
which is a bit rare in the medical world, but in naturopaths kind of go, I want to get you better. I don't want to see you again, really.
Absolutely. God, no.
And I
I
guess
would rather you were so well that you never needed me.
yeah,
I would rather you were so well that you told everybody you possibly ever came across that you thought might have Lyme. My God, I worked with this woman for a year and we got really well.
yeah.
Um,
And there's
that's
hope
my
in
business
that.
model. I have no desire to keep you sick. That is
Yeah,
not your highest outcome. That is not what either of us want or need.
no.
God, no.
And I think that having yourself, and there's a couple of other practitioners and naturopaths around, but they're very few and far between who really specialise in this area, which gives some hope to people because many, I guess, don't consider this these days. They kind of go, I did see a naturopath and they didn't really know too much. And that can happen. I mean, it's the same with a doctor. Or they say, really, I can't afford it. But can you afford to be sick? Can you afford not to be working?
That's the question, isn't it? Can you afford not to?
Can you afford to do it yourself and take all these supplements just on the off chance?
Throwing more money. Oh, I read a blog and I thought it sounded good, or I saw an Instagram post that sounded great. I spent $70, sat in the cupboard. And I think it's like anything, you know, if you don't like your accountant, you find a new one. If you don't trust your mechanic, try the other one in town. If you go to a naturopath and they're treating you for adrenal fatigue, they're probably not the naturopath you need right now. They might be brilliant at adrenal fatigue, but you don't have adrenal fatigue. You've got a vector-borne disease. You need an expert in the thing you've got, particularly when you've got very, very complex infections. If you just, you know, if this was just you didn't sleep well, go and see a general naturopath. That's great. But when you've got difficult things, you need an expert in what you've got, or else you're going to be wasting time and money. And it is expensive. I look at the wholesale price of the herbs that I own. I look at the wholesale price of the magnesium that I feed my kids every day, and I think, holy moly, stuff is expensive right now. Working with me, I give all my patients a 10% discount off all the pracky stuff. I do the best I can, and there's those 12 months plan, there's about a 40% discount in them. I need to look at the pricing because the world is very expensive right now.
Yeah, it's getting more expensive as well.
Right. That's right. Can you afford not to try, I think?
Yeah. But I did see on your website too that you've got that plan, and I think you outline a 12-month sort of cost analysis as well with that people can know. And I guess if they break it down over 12 months, it's a couple of $100 per month, but you're getting your time, I think, not only at each appointment, but in between as well, I think you sort of said.
You get WhatsApp with me, and the WhatsApp is the thing that I'm constantly hearing feedback on. That's the thing that's changing their lives. That's the thing when you're alone and you're confused and you're in pain and no one believes you, and you can send me a WhatsApp at 10 o'clock at night and say, this is what's happening. And I can say, try these 3 things.
Well, let's not say 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I got hurt. You'd be surprised. I'm in WA though as well. So they're sending me a message at 10 o'clock at night from New Zealand or from New South Wales or something, and it's coming to me. And I won't answer. Like if it's not the right time for me to answer, I'm not going to look at that message.
Yeah.
You send it when it's on your mind. I'll get to it when I can within a day. You know, we've got to protect my mental health and my family's well-being as well.
Yeah.
But it's the continuity of the care that really is making the huge differences in people's lives. And like I said, I'm seeing far, far better results the last 18 months than I did before that. And that's not just that I've had more years in this. It's that I have chosen to be much more hands-on with my patients. And that could just be that I can now. My youngest is 10. When my youngest was 6, sorry, there's already a very needy person in my life. I don't have the space. I can just see you when we've got an appointment time. Whereas now I've got more capacity.
Yeah. And you can see that you're very passionate about this and finding that there's a desperate need within Australia. And like I said, we need to sort of get that paradigm away from and that dogma away from the Lyme stuff and talking about all these other infections. As you said, there's lots of vector infections. And the person could have other underlying infections which could not even be vector infections as well.
Or Hashimoto's. They've already come to me with SIBO. They've got Hashimoto's. Whatever. There's other stuff that it's life. We've all got our health.
Yep. And you can address all of those, and your clinical experience can sort of over time sort of bring this out. And if somebody has a flare and they can contact you, you can reassure them, well, that to me means that there could be something viral going on. I've had recently myself, I was put on some antivirals to try and test. A lot of tests I've done. And again, viral testing is pretty poor as well, you know.
Especially in Australia, it's yes or no. Have you seen it or not?
Yeah.
Whereas
And
in the American results, you get a quantity. This is a really big fat problem right now. Not just, you've seen it. Or this is not a problem. So we know, let's move on. It's probably not Epstein-Barr. The markers are super low.
That's right. And they can reactivate. They can come and they can go. And it could be symptomatic and then they go back into hiding again. Well, I did the antivirals for 2 courses, 4 a day, 800 milligrams. It knocked me for 6. And my doc sort of said, yep, that gives a good indication. And you would have the same thing. You take some herbs and you might start with low. If you certainly know that the person's very, very sensitive, then you definitely take 1 drop. And you can do that with herbs. You can take
and just one herb.
Yep.
Like my super sensitive patients, they get little bottles. Start one. I don't want to cross-react stuff. I don't want to confuse the data that we're getting from your response to it. So it's just, we can do that.
So do that. So it seems there's initially also you probably give people there's a long-term plan with this, which gives people reassurance and hope, because many don't. They go from one place to the other and he doesn't know, they don't know, and they get lost and then they give up. A lot of times they very much give up. So
they get worse and then they give up.
Yeah, very
and
much.
I think that's one of the things I'm really clear to explain to my patients when they first start working with me is it's very, very likely that I'm going to make a mistake. It's very, very likely that I'm going to give you something that makes you worse. And the longer we work together, the less of those mistakes I make. But I will read your picture and I'll think, okay, this is absolutely, we need to do liver work because you've given me all these symptoms that say liver, liver, liver. And we'll start with some liver herbs and you'll get nausea and headaches, classic liver detox symptoms. And I'll say, whoops, sorry, put you in bed for 3 days. Fantastic. What we're going to do instead is come back to those liver herbs in 3 months and we're going to do these other things first. We're going to start with castor oil packs. We're going to start with 2 drops. We're going to start with nutrients to support the liver, but not sulfur ones for you because you've got a sulfur sensitivity or whatever it might be. It's that fine tuning. And the difficulty with Lyme infections, with borrelia infections, with all the tick-borne stuff, that Herxheimer reaction. As we start killing them, if your drainage pathways are not open and flowing enough, you're going to get poisoned by corpses. If you've ever seen any of the science under microscopes about what happens when the immune system targets an infection, it literally, they explode. All of their juices inside come right out. You've squashed a slug, all that slime comes out. Your immune system then has to catch all of that junk, encapsulate it all, and process it through your lymphatic system. And all of that will be sluggish in a long-term infection because that's what the immune system has been struggling to do, to clear the waste. It'll be overloaded already. And so we just need to gently, gently make sure drainage is happening so that when you put killing herbs in, you don't get worse. So I'm always saying to my patients, find the place where you can feel it, not the place where you're suffering. And if you're ever suffering, stop, skip a dose, halve the dose, take a day off, get back to a stable baseline so that we can then stay where you're feeling it. And the feeling it might be feeling a bit better, thanks. It doesn't have to be feeling a bit worse, but just I want some response but not suffering. Because the suffering, if we push you into a herx, and it's not usually me that does it, it's usually my patients do it themselves. They're like, I was doing so well on 1 dose, I took 3. And now they're in bed for a week with a migraine. It might take me 3 or 4 weeks to get them back to the baseline before they poison themselves. So we waste time. So I really see consistently the baby steps compound quicker and faster, you'll get better than heroic doses that you get sick on. And so it's just a horrible place of trying to take the next step tentatively without increasing the suffering too much in people that are already suffering far too much.
That's very true. And as a patient myself, you kind of go, I don't really want to suffer anymore. Why should I want to take this and feel a lot worse? But clinically, that gives you, it's an observable place. You don't need a test. The test is the treatment itself. And if you get worse, you kind of go, well, that clearly indicates to me that you've definitely got this. What would be some of the symptoms? Let's talk about the symptoms of the infections, because
That's
there's a
right.
lot of overlap with symptoms of tick-borne infections. Rickettsias and borrelias give you pretty similar kind of symptoms,
Identical clinically,
almost identical.
I
You know,
could not tell it. And then I've even had people who were just in a water damaged building have identical symptoms as well. And I've been certain this is a borrelia infection, and they move out of their mouldy rental.
Yeah.
And all the symptoms go away. So there's 3 there that are pretty similar. There's always differences, but if we sort of think, I call it colloquially like total body crap feel. Like it's just when there's fatigue, when there's malaise, when there's confusion, when there's aching, when there's some neurological stuff, mood is down or really erratic, you're just feeling rubbish in lots of ways. So all of the tick-borne diseases have total body crap feel. So then when you're getting specifically into stuff that is more unique with each of them, there's some keywords that you hear constantly. So if we're starting with the borrelias or a classic Lyme from an overseas infection, Bell's palsy. If you've got a Bell's palsy, a sudden onset, that is I'm like, ding, ding, let's look at borrelias now.
Yeah.
If you've got a bullseye rash, 100%. A bullseye rash is 100% indicative of a borrelia infection. So a bullseye rash is a funny thing. It's a thing that can expand. It'll stay days to weeks. It's not itchy. It's not raised. It doesn't weep. So spider bites can give you a bullseye rash with bruising and itching. Mosquito bites can give you a histamine response that looks like a bullseye, but it's itchy and it goes away quickly. A borrelia bullseye rash stays and expands slowly. So depending on where you got bit, as we said before, neck bites give neck pain, a neurological condition. Ankle bites give ankle pain. A lot of people will get bit under the arms here. And so they're getting straight away into the carditis. They're getting into the heart stuff.
Interesting.
So ticks are just crawling up your clothes and they're going to find the nice, delicious skin that it. So that can be where the underarms, also top of the waistband. Men have to look in their other moist, damp, warm spots. Get a lot of scrotum bites, little boys with penis bites. So just checking where you get bit is going to tell you what your first symptoms are quite often. Your initial borrelia infections will give you your fever and chills, your flu-like stuff. You'll be out. You'll feel rubbish. You get sweating.
Which is why it's often confused with a flu, if you don't know, or recently, of course, with the long COVID, there's a lot of case studies saying, we thought it was long COVID or we thought it was COVID, and it actually turned out to be, borrelia or overseas Lyme disease as well. So you've got to be quite aware of what it could be, and a few could be's, and really understand that and rule them in or rule them out. And not just go straight to, you flu-like and everything and you've been like this for 6 months, therefore you've got chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. That's a big bugbear with me. Because those are, again, the 2 diagnoses that I got, and it took 16 years to finally fully get recognised that for my case it was overseas Lyme disease, and also on top of that Australian rickettsia, which makes me a little bit iffy that it was some kind of Australian borrelia really and rickettsia at the same time perhaps. But anyway, we don't know.
Well, if we had understood your true root cause 15 years earlier, would you be in a different position in your life now? Very likely, because we could have treated the infection when it was acute. Now we're trying to treat the damage that they've done to your body for so long. And that's harder work. And there's still a lingering infection that's burrowed itself somewhere, probably. It's not just floating around in your bloodstream so your immune system can kill it. It's burrowed into delicious places like your connective tissue in your joint pockets, burrowed into your spine and into the nervous system in the spine. So European testing will do a spinal tap. If you present to an Austrian hospital after a tick bite and you've got paralysis or you've got flu-like symptoms, they'll do a spinal tap to check and get it out of the spinal cord. We don't do that in Australia. There is no universe where there's a single doctor here that's going to do that.
In very rare cases. You'd have to be acutely unwell, very feverish.
With an overseas infection.
But they get missed a lot as well.
Absolutely they do. Or they get the classic, you had an overseas tick bite, have your 10 days of doxycycline. Bye.
You're cured now. I was told I was cured after my, short course as well, which is not great. I mean, that's where the guidelines do fail us as well. I mean, they're a guide. That's it, but they take it as gospel, and they shouldn't.
But if it was 6 weeks of doxy, 100 milligrams twice a day, we might be avoiding some of that
Yeah.
debilitating long-term stuff.
That's right. And recent research is saying that it's far better with having a double antibiotic at
Yes.
the same time.
Yeah, you do amoxicillin and doxy or clarithromycin and doxy or something else.
Yeah, and that may be what we need to advocate for as well, but it's going to take a long time with the research.
Yeah.
But coming back to some of the symptoms as well, like Bartonella, for example, a lot of times you can get that kind of weird rash that looks like stretch marks and so forth.
See it. I think I've seen that twice in patients.
Yeah.
And Bartonella would be one of my most common co-infections.
And it could be different types of Bartonella.
It could be.
Some give that and others that don't give that, because there's quite a few species of Bartonella as well.
There is. There's only sort of 2 we're checking for. But I don't know that I actually see the skin stretch marks in Bart very often. The Americans report it, but I don't know that I'm seeing it in whatever Bartonellas we have in Australian ticks. I'm not seeing it in my Australians.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of patients.
Mood swings is a big one with Bartonella. You've got the neuro stuff, like when there's Bartonella.
And the burning feet. Burning
feet, glass in feet that when you stand up in the morning, it feels like there's sand in them to walk on, and it'll dissipate through the day. You get a lot of neurological symptoms with Bartonella. And so then if you put Bartonella with your borrelia, that's my people who have got, neuro Lyme. Yeah. That's when you've got a lot of the neurological conditions, the dizziness, the tremor, the pain,
mood swings, the rage.
Neuropathy. Yeah, and the rage. Bart rage is a big thing. And I think that Bart rage is one of the clinical things that's different from the other tick-borne diseases. So if you've got sudden outbursts of rage that is not characteristic, not related to the thing that you've just experienced in your life, and you suddenly feel like you're just at 100 exploding, want to throw something, that's not normal.
No.
And particularly if it's not normal to you, that's a pretty big Bartonella one. Liver enzymes can go up with Bartonella, but I don't see it that often. UTI symptoms can come up with either of these Lyme, borrelia types or Bartonella. I see it more in the longer stuff. I don't see that UTI type symptoms or interstitial cystitis as an initial symptom with them. But Bart's got all your flu-like stuff in the first infections as well when it's acute.
Yeah.
Rickettsias, as I say, they're identical to Lyme clinically, but it doesn't have the bullseye rash, the Bell's palsy. It'll have the fever, the chills, the headache, the flu-like, the muscle pain, the malaise. It's got that stuff.
And this is where we could be getting a little bit confused in some cases where people just only get a borrelia test done in Australia and forget altogether about our Rickettsias. Again, I just was talking to you before and I read this report, which was from 1999. It was from Stephen Gray, who's got the lab, and he really knows his Rickettsia stuff.
Yes.
And he was saying that, back in Queensland in 1877, where they started to recognise the Ricketsias as well. So they've been in Australia for a long time. And even back in the convict area, they were noticing the Rickettsia-like illnesses from the fleas and from the mites.
Okay, interesting.
They were coming across. So there could have been these, come across to Australia as well from there.
Maybe.
And then they ended up within our animals, et cetera, et cetera. That's a strong possibility too. But look, we've got a lot of
colonialisation, isn't it wonderful?
Yeah, we've got a lot of information on the Ricketsias, and I would say to people, get to know the Ricketsias. Go and test for that. If you think you've got Lyme, think Rickettsia, because
I agree.
It just indicated
and it's an easier thing to treat for in Australia. Your standard doctor can order that test. Your standard doctor can treat based on it. You might need to prompt them as to what you want.
Yes.
But a good, kind, open-minded GP, and there are thousands of them.
Yep.
They don't have to be your expensive functional med types, just a person who cares and wants you to get better. They can be flying under the radar in this country, and I've got GPs all around the country that do great things for my patients. They're open-minded and they care, and I can send them a list of possible antibiotics to consider, and they will pick one from that list, and they will prescribe it for 6 months, even though they shouldn't.
The doctor shouldn't
don't discount your local doctor if they're kind.
Yeah, and the doctors shouldn't be fearful. There's this fear response about this no Lyme, and therefore they shut down with everything. But you've got to say, well, look, let's forget that, because I was bitten by a tick and Ricketsias are here, and you can go to the DISCAT website, the federal government website. That's all there. It's all about Ricketsias, and also if you're in North Queensland, it's the Q Fever. That's a possibility.
It's typhus too.
It's a lot more rare, but it's still a possibility.
Absolutely. And Whipple's is up there. And so I think with the Australian Rickettsia lab, I think they're the best in the world for rickettsia. And it's one of my complaints, and I constantly send emails to companies and they ignore me. What I'm asking for in those emails is, I love your test. Can you please add more Australian rickettsial species to it? Because I want to use your test, but I need more rickettsia species for my patients here. It's a gap in the market. So something like Vibrant. Yeah. Send those emails all the time. I've asked Armin, I've asked Vibrant. I can't prescribe through IGenics or DNA Connections because there needs to be a doctor, not a naturopath. But Vibrant have such a great range of borrelia infections, and it's why I use them a lot, because we're more likely to get Australia's borrelia cousins showing up with the recognised borrelia infections in the Vibrant test, because there's so many they're asking about. So we're much more likely to get that cross-reactive yes that is reassuring for the patient. I don't need it clinically. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I get to a point where I think, is this, which way next? And sometimes that testing is useful. Testing is useful for family. If you've been sick a long time, sometimes your family just need to know what you've got so they can back you more.
Here's my proof. I think the thing is, and we don't know definitively, but the testing is based on the sensitivity and the specificity, those two S's, and we don't have 98% plus on both of those counts. And so a lot of times people will tell me, look, I was tested, I was only bitten in Australia, I've never left the country, and it came back with borrelia burgdorferi, senso stricto, and that's my test. And they say it's not that, but the test came back positive to that. And one of the things that, because the labs will say, well, that's a false positive because it's cross-reacting. And I'm going, well,
what's it cross-reacting to?
Exactly. What is it cross-reacting?
Borrelia is very close cousins with exactly the same symptoms that we've got in New South Wales. Is that what it's cross-reacting to?
Well, they do say it could be viruses, and that's, look, I don't know.
I don't know that I see that.
Yes. But there's a possible and probable scale and definite. I think probably it is cross-reacting with our Australian strains, and it's just showing up as a borrelia burgdorferi, but it is a borrelia.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's strongly indicating a borrelia, especially if you're symptomatic. And let's say that your rickettsia is a definite negative. And here's the thing about ricketsia's testing in Australia. Your first one, if it comes back positive, they discount it and they say, please test again, because again, they say again cross-reacts with other infections, not just ricketsias. And you do need to, so this is an important thing to note, is if you do get a positive test, your pathology, which then is fed back to your doctor, the doctor will say, that could be a false positive, but you need to get, as a patient, you need to come back to the doctor, or if the doctor's not telling you, is to get another test done within another month. And as you've indicated, probably then to get it, to do this provocation would really help.
And a sauna. And unfortunately, ordinarily with saunas in my patients, when you're very sick and you're very toxic and you've been sick a long time, I would say start a sauna at 7 minutes, 40 degrees. Even if you don't sweat, that penetration of the heat into the tissues is useful. If you feel good tomorrow, do another one the day after. So day 3, you do one more, 7 degrees, 40.
That's good to know.
7 minutes, 40 degrees, sorry. And then if you're good at that, maybe go 10 minutes, 40 degrees. If you're fine at that, maybe 10 minutes, 45. Just gently up your variables until you're not suffering and you're feeling good and you're hydrated, not headachy, not detoxy, not exhausted tomorrow. With this provocation, the expense of provocations means that I think the expense of testing, means I think that provocation of just go half an hour, 45 degrees, as hot as you can tolerate, 50 degrees, 60 degrees is, especially if we're looking at the overseas labs that are nearly 2,000 Australian dollars, if you're in bed for 2 weeks for that kind of money.
Yeah. I think
let's drive that thing out of where it's hiding back into the bloodstream so we can take the blood sample and actually get some data we can use to get your money's worth.
It's interesting that you're saying that. It's not all infections, because the borrelia definitely is a corkscrew, spirochete, like syphilis. It's a nastier cousin than syphilis.
Yes.
And it corkscrews into your tissues and all through, and so it doesn't like living in the blood at all.
No.
But your ricketsias, your babesias, it's another parasitic infection.
Yeah, I want to come to the symptoms of those as well.
Yeah, so babesia, which it also does like living in the blood, and so does your Bartonella. They do like living in the blood, so
They
you're
do.
more likely to pick them up in the blood. So it's still probably good to do a provocation, but you don't necessarily
Bartonella
need it
hides
for those.
in biofilm, though. Bartonella's an
Yeah.
intelligent organism, so it'll hide. If you've had it for a long time, it's fine in the blood, but it won't be swimming about in there, because when you're in the blood, you're vulnerable to the immune system.
So the provocation could probably break up these biofilms and make
Yes.
it, and then you might start getting because again, I think, is it an antibody response, or are we doing PCR on those?
It's
Or growing
antibody
them?
for Bartonella in Australia.
Yeah, okay. So you still need to get the provocation to then spike an antigen thing.
Yeah.
There's when again I was reading a few books, they were sort of saying as a patient too, if you can get your blood drawn when you're feeling your worst, because we do get very, very up and down as well symptomatically, and around the full moon might be a good time, because we do feel worse than that, and it may not be just parasites. It's still the borrelia and everything that can make us feel worse around about a full moon.
A lot of borrelia, especially the tick-borne relapsing fever types of borrelia, they're on a 28, 29-day cycle, so they can tie into the full moon as well.
So that's another interesting point to note, that I was feeling okay, and then all of a sudden I got worse again. So that's this cyclic sort of thing where you're symptomatically. That's probably another good time to get your test done. Do provocation and pick a time when you sort of know, which is probably why it's nice to write in your diary, even each day, little things of how you're feeling, and then get to know your own patterns as well of illness too.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I really recommend in my intake. Get yourself a health journal when you're working with me. Every day, took 3 drops of that, 2 drops of that, ate 1 carrot. Don't make it a Dear Diary, and just kind of track it so that you can start to see the pictures and patterns forming. And also then if you go forward 20 years and you have a car accident and you relapse or whatever, you've got your treatment pathway. You know how your body recovers. These things can run in families. So then if you start seeing that in your offspring, you can start going, oh, when I had those 3 symptoms, we did this, this, and this. Maybe you can start to treat your child first. It's a bit of a roadmap for how to recover. Take notes. You're not going to remember. One of the beautiful things about humans is when we're sick, we feel like it's never going to end. As soon as we're well, we forget what it was like when you were terrible.
Yeah.
And so you forget how bad you were. So just write it down. Put a number next to it. Headache, 5 out of 10. 10 is, chronic migraine, vomiting.
Yep.
1 is no head pain at all. Put a number on it. Make it quantified so you can check it again.
There is a few, I was just thinking about that. There are a couple of apps that are out at the moment. One is called Visible. It's specifically for long COVID.
Okay.
It is free, but the same kinds of symptom list for tick infections or vector infections are in that. And it gives you a morning thing. You can actually measure your HRV with that, with your finger against the camera.
Yeah, on the camera.
And they do say that the lower your HRV, the unhealthier you are. So that's another little measurement. It's free. It's another little thing you can measure your data with as well. So we've mentioned Babesia. We've mentioned borrelia. Borrelias, and I think we need to talk borrelias and borreliosis rather than Lyme in Australia, and Rickettsias. So the other one, the big one, well, there's anaplasma and ehrlichiosis, and they're very similar to the Rickettsias.
They give the Rickettsia type symptoms to me. I can't tell them clinically apart.
No.
To be fair, I very rarely see ehrlichia come up in blood tests anywhere. There's some
anaplasma.
There's some ehrlichiosis in some of the southern states in America. I see some of my American patients will have that if they're kind of Utah. I don't see it a lot in Australia. And so whether that's that we don't have good testing or whether that clinically it responds to the same things Rickettsia and Borrelia do, and so I wipe it all out at the same time. But I don't see a lot of it. I don't see a lot of anaplasma either, to be fair. I see a bit more mycoplasma pneumoniae. I see mycoplasma more than chlamydia pneumoniae. The one we didn't talk about was Babesia. We talked about Bartonella with the rage and the neuro and the foot pain. Babesia is more of a monthly cycle. Sweating at night is your big clue.
Yeah.
Drenching night sweats and fever. That's Babesia constantly.
The other one is
it's worse with your full moon. Yes, air hunger, because Babesia is a red blood cell parasite, more in the malaria family. So you're going to get your sweats and your air hunger because it's destroying the red blood cells, and it's your red blood cells that carry oxygen. So you feel like you've got oxygen.
Yeah.
The liver is on the right side. Get your hands right up under your ribs. Does it hurt? Does the liver hurt? Is it nauseous to touch? That can be, we need to know that clinically. I'll start with liver stuff if you've got liver pain. But pain in the liver and spleen area, fatigue, anemia, it'll come up on the blood tests as anemias. So sometimes your live blood analysis, people can pick up babesia. You'll get an insomnia because you're awake at night, hot and sweaty and flappy. Skin crawling can be either ants under the skin. I see ants under the skin with Bartonella as well, but can be that sense of insects crawling on top too with babesia. And brain fog, fatigue, crap feel. But it's the night sweats, the air hunger, the drenching fevers, and a bit of a monthly cycle with the full moon as well. And the new moon, so it can be every 2 weeks you'll have 3 or 4 bad nights.
Yeah, because it is a parasite, so you do need totally different
it's an antiparasite.
Treatment.
You need treatment. It responds really well to herbs.
Yeah, that's good.
And then my other part of the overlap is the SIRS picture, the toxic mold. And the reason I have that in my toolbox, and I do see patients just for SIRS, all of my borrelia patients respond to mold when it's in building because the immune system's already dysfunctional, dysregulated and chaotic. And then mold is another thing that's running in that same pathway that's already primed. So mold will make the tick-borne diseases worse. And we need to treat it first to get the immune system back to functional before we can move on.
Symptomatically, would you have more asthmatic lung sort of things with the mold versus?
So there's 2 ways your immune system will respond to mold. You'll either go to that allergic place, which is your itchy eye, sneezing, cough. It's croup in kids. Kids get bedwetting as well with moldy buildings, but it is the breathing stuff when there's an allergic response to mold. The part of the immune system that's affected in SIRS is your HLA, so that's your human leukocyte antigens. They're the same pathway that can code for celiac disease.
So the DRQ8, I think it is, the test you get done for.
Yes, it's DRDQ serotyping is what we'd ask Medicare for.
Yep.
It's got to be through a sonic lab. So that's Douglas Hanley Moore in Sydney or Clinipath over here.
Or Melbourne Pathology.
Yeah, okay. Are they the sonic you guys have? Yeah. It's word loss in SIRS.
Oh.
You'll be it's word loss. People are like, oh, you know the thing that you put the food on, the flat thing? Yeah, a plate. Shocks, stabbing, electric-y, shocky things in the body, and light sensitivity. My mold, like the 3 clues where I'm thinking, oh, this is definitely mold now, is people who say, I don't want to drive at night anymore because all the lights are too twinkly, turn off the lights at night because everything's too bright and overwhelming, eyes are watering, vision's going down.
So will they do that contrast test?
Yeah, you can do a visual contrast test. I do the online ones. They're free. It's just vcstest.com. You don't have to click through to the payout. It's an optional. Pay them $19.95 US to get the report, or you can just get the report and screenshot the results for me. So you just cover one eye, report what you can see, wait a couple of minutes so the eye that's been covered can stabilise, do the other eye. You wear your glasses if you're a glasses wearer when you do the test. Send me that result. The SIRS stuff, because it's the leukocytes aren't recognising mold, that's when you're going more to your chronic fatigue symptoms as well as these kind of word loss, shocks and light sensitivity and you've got gut stuff, because if you've got mold colonising, you'll have sinus stuff. You have lung stuff and you have gut stuff. Where is the mold colonising? It wants damp and dark.
Yeah.
Any of your damp, dark cavity places is where it could grow. And then it'll just be pain, brain fog, immune system that's dysfunctional. When you've got the HLA genes that can't flag mold, a certain part of your white blood cells don't know which things they're hunting. The rest of your immune system knows there's a foreign invader, but the specific part that would do something about it, shut it down and ship it out, isn't seeing it properly. And so you get a very chaotic, dysregulated immune response. And my mold patients will usually, after years, then they get a very high histamine response, because histamine is a non-specific part of the immune system. It's a thing the immune system will do when it can't specifically find a problem, but it knows there's something somewhere. It'll just go, how about we make inflammation and try to sneeze it out? How about we just try to mucus it out or get it out some way with inflammation? And so that's when the MCAS will start as well after long-term mold exposure.
Yeah. So really, a practitioner, you need to know all of this stuff, and the patient can be so complex and so confusing to try and unravel this like a layer of an onion. And I guess this is why it will take time. I mean, I guess we're, I've been unwell for 20 years, which sounds ridiculous, but because it took so long to determine what was really going on with me, they weren't really treating me. So that's something that, people need to really know, like yourself as a practitioner, the complexity that could be involved in that. And the same with mould. A lot of people will look around their home and they kind of go, I don't see any mould. But a lot of times it's very much hidden. And these mould particles, I guess, you're breathing them in all the time, but you may not be aware of it. And that could complicate things because people say, oh, look, I don't have mould. What would you do in that case if they sort of say you don't have mould? If we're going to talk a little bit about mould, we've been going for a little while now, but with the mould, there's a lot that's coming up lately that the urine testing is really not beneficial and it's probably not worth doing. Would you agree with that as well?
Yeah, I've never liked urine testing. Mould's got an affinity for bile. You poop out bile. It doesn't come out through your kidneys. Mould is very inflammatory to the body, so it's going to shut down your natural drainage pathways. So asking, is there mould in a urine sample? We're asking an organ that's not designed to excrete mould, that's not functioning very well because of the mould. Has it seen mould? And we've got no idea where the mould came from or how long it's been in the body in that situation. So I don't find them accurate. They can spike up and down based on you just ate peanut butter. Or did you just stand in line at a mouldy bank for 4 hours and so tomorrow's mould urine is going to be high, but you don't have mould in your house? To me, it's not really asking a question that's got any value in asking. And if it was an $80 question, by all means, ask it. But it's $550 now. I think it's $380 US. These are expensive questions to be asking for a lot of maybes. And I know that Dr. Neil Nathan, the author of Toxic, and he's got a new book coming out, loves these tests. He runs them on everybody, and I do get to co-consult with him every so often because he always wants a local pracky to do the prescribing, and he'll just oversee as a consultant. So I get to sit in with him every so often. And I do see his point. The part that I think that all the Americans misunderstand is that if we're treating the whole patient as a person, we don't need that data. But the Americans do, because the Americans are in an insurance model that says if you have a test, then you can justify a medication. And if you can justify the medication, then it can all be claimed on insurance and the patient can just do a small copay. Whereas because we have a bit more of a healthcare system that's possibly accessible for more of us, I don't need to justify why I'm prescribing something to you because there's no insurance company breathing down my neck trying to justify or cut corners on your health and wellness. I can give you what you need. And I don't need to justify that to an overseeing body. So I think that's the reason the American functional practitioners are, in my opinion, over testing because they're just bulk billing it. Whereas here we're not bulk billing it. So I've really got to justify if it's going to help you, that data. And is it going to help you in a way that I don't already know?
Yeah.
Because if I know the answer, why are we doing the test? We know you've got mould in your body. Let's just treat the mould.
I think you've really outlined the reasons why they do it, which is linked to the insurance over there, and most of it's private insurance, of course. Whereas we tend to criticise the Medicare, but it is still a terrific system. It can be fine-tuned, but we are lucky in that respect. More so for acute situations like a broken leg or need surgery or something like that. Where it fails, of course, is for us with this chronic, confusing, complicated conditions, and it certainly is complicated when you've got these infections, whether it's any kinds of vectors, and you add mould on top of it, which could play a role or may not. But I guess you would need to investigate in the person anyway, wouldn't you?
Definitely. So I wouldn't ask their body, have you seen mould? Because that doesn't tell me anything. I would ask them to leave their house. A lot of people know they've had a storm damage and they know that the tree fell on the roof at some point. They know the gutters overflowed. They know they had a water leak in a bathroom. Even though they can't see mould now, is that still a problem? Was it remediated to health code or was it just painted over? But what we can do simply with mould is leave.
Okay, so is
go
there
camping for 2 weeks and come back to your house. Do you get worse? When you go and visit your mum for 3 nights and you come back to your house, do you get worse? If you do that for me a few times, I'm going to be able to tell you got worse in your house.
Yeah,
there's something we need to look at here.
Yeah, there's a lot of case studies that I read online that indicate that. I
The
left, I
unmasking.
went on a holiday, and I felt so much better. And they
Hmm.
don't seem to click to the fact that there is something going on in the house, that they're
Yes.
breathing and so forth as
They
well.
think it's just stress. You think, oh, I went on holidays and I didn't have to work and I felt good and I was in the sunshine. I didn't have
Interesting.
any pressures. Mm.
So, is there a test that you can do on the body to give you a more accurate thing, saying that you might have some kind of aflatoxin or mycotoxin or something going on, or in your case, you don't think there is? There's not
I
really.
don't think they're a highly accurate and highly specific mold test. The
Okay.
Schumacher protocol's got a whole swag of tests that are very, very non-specific. Not all of them are Australian, are available here, and the ones that we have, there's some possibility they're not particularly accurate or reproducible.
So, what
I think for a
would you?
mold test, do the Schumacher checklist. Do you have
Okay.
mold symptoms? Do you have a mold exposure? And then do that free BCS test. I do like a HLA gene test. You know,
Yeah.
it'll be reassuring. Yeah, you're a person that doesn't process mold properly, which means
Yeah.
even a small exposure in a basement in London 20 years ago when you were a grad, and you had your overseas 2 years and you've never been quite well since. That's clinically significant if you've got HLA genes that can't process mold properly.
So you do a few clinical things and have a strong indication that the person might have this, and you would treat it anyway. It is the treatments mostly binders, which then would they benefit also the tick infection die-off stuff as well?
Yeah, 100%. Is it mostly binders? No, I think it's getting your body to function again. So it's getting your organs to work, it's getting your immune system to work, it's getting you out of mold will often push you into a Th2 or a Th17 an autoimmunity kind of dominance, or a Th2 inflammatory eczema, asthma problems. Um,
Would you suggest to the person to investigate the house or
Absolutely.
a
You can't get
terrible
well.
effect?
If your house is poisoning you, you're not
Yeah,
going to get well. I can keep you from falling off a cliff while you're still in a poisoned house, but ultimately you got to get out of a house that's poisoning you.
yeah. And if it's not visible, then they will definitely need a building biologist. And
Yes.
sadly, many people are renting. Of course, that would fall back to, either the person who's renting would have to say, I'm going to have to come up with $1,000 or so, because that's how much they cost, is
Hmm.
to get a building biologist in to I guess, analyse their house.
Hmm.
And if they
Yep.
pick it up, then I
For
think,
renters, we can do the Hurts Me Too, is more your $400 price range. It's just a Swiffer, and then they send it off for your top, I think it's 5 or 6 most pathogenic health problem molds. I would probably consider doing an ERMI just for an extra $100 or 150, and that's going to give you a lot more species of mold, and we can get some clinical data out of that. And those just come back with, they give you the mold and they give you the levels, but they give you a number. And it hurts me too, less than 11, you can probably get well in that house, and an ERMI less than 2, you can probably get well in that house.
okay. And
If
you
you're
can guide
highly
people with
sensitive,
that?
yep, you
So
just
you
do it
can,
through NSJ Enviro. You just buy them online, get them shipped out.
so another benefit of having your services is the fact that you can guide them to doing this, and they can do it themselves and teach them as
Absolutely.
well. So
Absolutely.
again, coming back to fact, you need a practitioner to guide you through this whole
I'll
process
save you money.
and
I'll
almost
save
be
you
like
money.
a coach with you too,
Yep.
provide
Yep.
you hope. Yeah,
And it's not only the clinical experience that you get with me. It's having someone who believes you. One of
yeah,
the things that's really, really common in these diseases is isolation. It's being alone. It's being unseen, unvalidated, unappreciated, and gaslit very, very often by doctors. And there's a lot of medical post-traumatic stress from that see PTSD that comes from not being believed for 20 years for you, 13 years. People told you it was in your head, probably. There's nothing wrong with you, nothing you can do about it. Sorry.
yeah. Well, the wrong diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia is my big bugbear. I
Yes.
think, look,
That cost you your health. If you'd
yeah,
understood that this could be treated with antibiotics or antibacterial herbs.
yeah. And I had a few mold issues as well, which I have been addressing. So yeah, that's where, I mean, I'm not saying that fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome does not exist. Definitely they do, and people are very, very sick
Yes.
on those. And there's multiple reasons why they end up with those kinds of symptoms.
Yes.
But I don't think it should always be your end diagnosis. I think you kind of go, well, look, you need to pace, you need to rest, you need to look after your body and so forth. But there are more things you can do. And let's investigate these things. And I do hear online people say, oh, look, I did get tested for Lyme in Australia, and it came back negative. And they discounted it. Whereas really, I don't think you can fully discount that. And did you investigate mould and mycotoxins and so forth? What's causing your histamine reactions, etc.? So you need to do deeper dives, even though you've got those diagnoses as well. Is there? We've spent a lot of time. We've covered a lot, which has been fantastic. Yeah, I know. I love chatting. So, what is there anything else you'd like to sort of finish on with this? I mean, I'm sure we can come back again and we can pick another topic as well.
Yeah. I was just thinking about what you're saying with the CFSME, and I think one of the other obstacles we find in Australia is that to access a disability pension, and truly so many of my patients need that support.
An NDIS now?
Yeah, but good luck. But that to get a disability pension, that CFSME diagnosis is probably the easiest way for a Lyme or a mould patient to get that funding. And that's absolutely necessary funding, and I believe that it should be available for everybody without hoops to jump through significant ones. And the difficulty with that disability pension is that they want to have conditions that don't improve so that you can get your money. And you're not well enough to work, but you might be able to get a bit of improvement. You might be able to get a hell of a lot of improvement over a couple of years, and then you could work again part-time, and that would be a better outcome for you. You've got purpose, you've got quality of life, you're out and about, whatever. But to keep in that funding model, you sort of have to stay sick, and it's not enough money to get well, and it's a bit of a trap. Yeah, and I think it's a necessary trap because you need to eat, but it's...
I think bottom line, most people would prefer to get better and get well. I mean, when somebody is so sick
and
for
there
so
needs
long,
to be a better buffer for that period when somebody's showing improvement. They still need financial support while they're doing a bit of retraining, while they're doing 1 day a week. The system is set up to make people sick.
Yeah. I think if you can sort of work with the system and say, look, my diagnosis is this for any kind of compensation that you definitely need because you are not working and you need to survive in that regards. But if you yourself sort of says, look, I don't want to stick with my diagnosis, it may well be, but you need to take the steps yourself and say, what else do you think it could be? Should I really be doing a deeper dive and a broader dive in all of this and investigate so many other possibilities? And we've talked two big ones, but I'm sure that there are other ones as well. And you would come across that as well. You mentioned mycoplasmas. Now, mycoplasmas don't always come from ticks. They do find it as well, you know.
Extremely transmissible. If you're around a person in your office who's coughing out mycoplasma, they're tiny. I think there's like 3,000 that fit on a red blood cell. Like, they're tiny little fellas.
They're finding it in Gulf
War
respiratory
syndrome. Yeah, like that's how they've evolved to be a respiratory virus. They want to spread.
Yeah, there's another one I was reading about the other day, which is P. acnes, which is your acne on the outside of the skin. But if you have any kind of surgery that ends up inside your body,
interesting.
Fatigues, you know, the typical type of chronic fatigue syndrome-like symptoms can come from that. It's a little bit more rare, but it's something that many people don't know about. And there's not very good testing for that either.
No. And that's where it comes back for me. How is this person presenting? Do they have an immune system that is under-resourced and unable to protect them? Yes. It doesn't matter exactly which bacteria. Let's fix the immune system.
Yep.
Because your innate, intelligent immune system wants to do its job. Your body wants to go back to homeostasis. It wants to go back to good functioning, provided you take the trauma picture out where you're frozen or stuck in fight and flight. Then your homeostasis is messed with. But if we can dig apart those variables and support the whole body healing and get the immune system resource, it doesn't really matter what infection you have. Your immune system is so intelligent that it wants to hunt them all. We just have to help it to do its job again.
So that's the path, the whole person. Exactly.
And repair the damage that the organism has done to you.
Yeah.
If you've got something targeting the liver, support the liver. If you've got something targeting the spleen, regenerate the spleen. There's brilliant herbs for splenogenesis, making new spleen cells.
Keeping an eye on the kidneys as well. That's something my doctor's doing at the moment as well. Yes. And there are things that you can do. It's interesting with the kidneys, they kind of go, Oh, yeah, not too bad. It's around about 60%. What do you mean it's got down to 60% so far?
It's terrible.
Really? You
Yeah,
know, but there are things you can do. I mean,
absolutely.
your fear response comes in and you go, oh my God, you know, but when you've got someone like yourself who can reassure you and say, no, there are things to do. There are herbs you can take as
Mm-hmm.
well that can improve the functionality of all that. And when we
Mm-hmm.
are, all of our organs are functioning so much better. As you said, we can deal with those assaults that's placed on us so much better.
Yeah.
And your clinical experience can determine and weave your way through what those assaults are,
Mm-hmm.
both the assaults that are still going, because a lot of people say that inflammation, this is one thing, and I was saying, oh, well, it's inflammation is the cause. And I'm kind of going, no, inflammation is the consequence.
Mm-hmm.
What is
Mm-hmm.
driving the inflammation still?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
And
that can be treated.
inflammation is usually an immune response. Inflammation is the thing that your immune system is creating when it's not encapsulating things that are foreign. So
Yeah,
once it targets a foreign material and it explodes them, if you don't scoop that all up, each of those little foreign bodies is going to go next door to the cell next door and stimulate a cell danger response. And your perfectly healthy cell is now going to stimulate an exploding response and it's going to die. So
yeah.
it's the compounding cell danger response that stimulates inflammation. So how do we slow that process down and get the immune system back in charge, back so it's resourced and can properly encapsulate and ship out, and that then your lymphatic system is working so that it can ship it into the lymphatic waste and get it out of the body through spleen or urine or fecal matter. So spleen dumps back into the liver, which then will poop it out.
Yep.
We've got to make sure all of that is happening because inflammation is a sign that you've got something that your immune system's dealing with.
Yeah, there's something driving that. It's like
Yes.
shot in the shoulder with a bullet. Did it go right through? You're fine.
Yeah.
Whereas, no, it's still there. I've got to get
Yes.
it out.
Yeah.
What's the thing that you've got to get out that's still driving that inflammation? And I guess
Is it just
sometimes,
faulty immune function? Over 20 years of sickness, it can just be the immune system is now so dysregulated, it can't do its job anymore. And there might not be an original pathogen left,
yep,
but the pathogen pushed you off the cliff and then you're just tumbling. And so we need to slow down all of those kind of responses of dysfunction that are occurring to the organs.
is that almost an autoimmune response or just
No, very, very different. Very, very different. Yeah.
because there's some people saying that, like for overseas, if you've got Lyme disease, it then turns into an autoimmune response. And I'm going, is it? But
No, not
they
quite.
are
It can
finding,
push you towards Th17 dominance, which can make you more likely to start mounting autoimmune responses or really developing strong food allergies and things, which then you start hunting out those food particles everywhere inside your own cells and tissues. But it doesn't, that's not my current understanding, no.
it's not an automatic, like a lupus, for example.
No, that's exactly right. You're not going to automatically start making antibodies to self-tissue
Yeah.
because you've got Lyme.
So it's really a cop-out when people say, oh, now you have an autoimmune response. No, you have an
Having
inflammatory.
that's right. You've got an inflammatory response, and it might look like an autoimmune condition. But whenever I have patients run it, it's very, very rare that they'll run full autoimmune profiles through immunologists and intelligent doctors and actually come back with an autoimmune. They just have autoimmune-like symptoms.
Yes, that's very, very good point with that. And it comes back to the borrelia too, because there's been some reports that saying they don't like the word chronic. Because they utilise the word chronic as being it's still got an active infection. But what they are finding in quite a lot of patients is these remnants of the borrelia. So it's kind of almost like a dead borrelia that's there, which then that alone could create an autoimmune, not an autoimmune, but a better response, an inflammatory response by having
If
these
Lyme has
remnants.
damaged your liver, if Babesia has damaged your liver, then you can kill those things and you might still have a damaged liver.
Yeah.
We need to fix that. If something like borrelias that secrete interleukin-10, so interleukin-10 is one of our anti-inflammatory cytokines. It's one of the ones that we secrete after we've had a foreigner or an infection, and the inflammatory parts of the immune system come out, get that, blow it apart, make it inert, ship it out. The interleukin-10 then starts to calm things down. Where everything's fine, guys, we've got the infection down, we're fine. Borrelia secretes interleukin-10 so that your immune system doesn't do that first hunt and kill part of its response. Because it doesn't want to die. It wants to turn you into a perfect home for it. It wants to eat up your collagen, nice and delicious. It wants to live in your joints, wonderful. If your immune system is killing it, that's very bad for those little borrelias that just want to live somewhere. So they're telling your immune system, we're not here, don't look at us. Nothing to see, folks.
Hence why they hide.
And then all your other infections come in over 20 years because your immune system was disabled by the borrelia that made you a perfect host.
It's a very, very smart infection. Been
It's
around
brilliant.
for millions of years.
Yes. Yeah. It's a worthy thing to take you out, at least.
Shall we finish it here?
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything else that you want to finish on with that?
Just feel complete.
We've covered a lot, haven't we? Well, those people who are watching this later, well, you've got a lot to go through. Probably take some notes.
Yeah.
Definitely take some notes. You can learn from that. I will put information about yourself, where you are and so forth, like I have on the other videos. Go back and have a look at the other videos we've done with Briana as well. They've been quite good too. We've already seen quite a few people have watched those. So we need to get the word out that you're out there. And look, and I know that you can't take on everybody, but there are some other people out there who might be like that. They're few and far between, but you see people from around Australia and you see people from around the world as well, which is really great, that you don't need to see you in person.
And I think that's really important for people with these kind of debilitating illnesses. It saves your spoons for the things that you need them for, because you don't have to sit in traffic, you don't have to sit in my waiting room getting exposed to somebody else's perfume or whatever the building might, you might react to in my office. It means that you just sit in your lounge room, comfortable in your clothes, and we just have our half an. That's exactly right. You can lie in bed on days when you're rubbish. I don't care. Don't use your spoons for me. And then you are just having that half an hour appointment with me or the 90-minute initials, whatever they are. But you're not wasting extra time having to drive, having to be exposed to different things. I think it's really useful.
I think people who have got diagnoses of chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, or got mast cell issues should at least contact you. I think you have a short...
I've got a free 15-minute initial. I mean, that's not a sales call for me. That's not a selling you anything. That's me wanting to learn who you are and decide, can I help you or not? Can we work together? Are we a good fit? Will we get responses and results? Because I don't want to waste your time.
No.
I don't want to spend years of my life. I could spend that helping someone who's going to get well. So if I don't think we can work together, I'm going to say that. If I don't think you have a condition that I specialize in, I'll say that. But take those 15 minutes. Get yourself in front of me and let's talk about your health and see what you need.
Okay. And as I was saying, that I think for people with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia who think there's nothing that can be done for them, I think seeing yourself to be able to say, well, look, let's really do an investigation on these areas of the vector infections and the mould as two big things. Let's rule them out even. And there's a possibility of doing that. And then you're going to come back, okay, well, what else am I left with? And I'm sure there's plenty of other things that can be looked at by yourself as well, which is the thyroid.
And if we're thinking about that CFS-ME, how much of that is post-viral? It's quite a high percentage. I thought it was something like 30% is post-viral. So again, how do we repair your immune system to target old infections? It's the same thing. It doesn't matter what the infection is. It's the same pathway. And then the other problem with CFS-ME is mitochondrial dysfunction. How do we feed your mitochondria so your cells make more energy and your cells are repaired so you feel better? If we can get you a 20% win in energy, that can be life-changing. That could mean you could do the dishes and hang out the washing in the same day. I mean, you could go out for dinner once a week with your friends or have someone come over. Like, even the small wins when you're really low are life-changing.
Yeah, just improve the quality of your life.
And if we can stop you sliding down, a lot of these conditions every year someone's getting worse. If we can stop you here, that's life-changing, because in 20 years you're not there. You're somewhere more functional. So halt the progression and then gradually work backwards. It is life-changing.
It is. You're providing some hope for a lot of people, that's for sure, because I do get annoyed when people sort of, once they've got those diagnoses, they say, well, look, there's nothing you can do. There's no treatment. And there could be. Not specifically. There's not one pill for one ill.
No, there's not. And if I could just give you one thing and you'd be fixed in a month, my God, that'd be amazing. I would do that. And I just take on like 2 rich people a year, 150 grand each, change your life in a month. Brilliant. But this absolutely, this is a process. It's just micro steps that compound, heal the body, heal the cells, heal the energy systems, get the immune system working, get the infection load down, get the drainage working, and then what are we left with? Just take the little steps. They really do build into something that is a different life in the future. And they say in naturopathy, for every year you've had a thing, it's a month to repair it. For every year you've had a single symptom, I would say it's more than a month for this chronic stuff. But we can unpack them. We can absolutely one by one unpack them.
There's a pathway and there's a plan. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been brilliant. It's almost 2 hours. Goodness me.
Gosh, sorry. What have I? Yeah, I've got patience soon.
Righty. Well, lovely
right.
chatting as usual. Have yourself
Peter.
a wonderful day, and thank you everybody for watching this later on.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll put all your details down underneath CCI and Ticna YouTube channel. So if people want to contact you, they can from there.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Peter, for your time. This is always so useful for our patients.
Yep, definitely. Pleasure. I always also learn myself, so thank you.
My pleasure.
All the best. See you. Bye.